Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today, if you couldn't tell by the footage, I wanted to talk about and give my first impressions of Lillia, the Bashful Bloom, now that I've had a bunch of time to both see her played and to play as her and get an idea as to what this champion brings to the table and especially what her prospects look like for professional viability. Now, Lillia, I can confirm, is fun as hell to play. She is so fast, and she has just this really nice play pattern of running into range, smacking somebody, and then running back out of range, and just kind of playing like the skittish deer she's supposed to be, which feels excellently flavorful. Lillia is not the kind of person who would ever just commit to a fight. She very much so is the kind of champ that just kind of wants to chill out, and she'll smack you, but then she's going to run the hell away, and then she's going to come back in once she's got her courage back and hit you again, and it just feels very flavorful, and I'm glad that Riot managed to make her feel this way, but also give her a reasonable play pattern. Because remember that she is supposed to be a skirmisher, which means that she more or less isn't going to assassinate somebody. She's not going to kill you in a big burst of damage. Her whole goal is to sort of wear you down slowly but surely by landing damage consistently and eventually getting you to a point where you're just worn down and die. And the idea behind a skirmisher is that it doesn't matter who they're hitting, their damage is basically target agnostic. And that's why it's nice that she does have the percent max HP damage on Dream Laden Bow. She does the really high true damage with her Q. It's really, really nice. And it gives her a fun play pattern, especially in team fights where you're sort of constantly looking for moments to kind of run back in, hit a couple champions with your abilities, and then run back away and wait for your cooldowns to come back. She definitely feels all but uncatchable to certain champions, especially like Juggernauts. I don't think a Juggernaut can catch a Lillia who has Rylai's. I really don't. Not without using Flash or something else completely ridiculous in order to get to her, because she's just that fast, and with the Rylai's on top of that, you will really never get close to her. Kind of does feel like you need super high DPI to play this champ, in all honesty. Conversely, though, Lillia is squishy as hell. She's going to die in about less than a second if you get CC'd at all, or if an assassin jumps on her. So she does have weaknesses in that regard. I can certainly see Lillia would be very weak to champions like Zed or Talon, who can just kind of see her and then blow her up before she has an opportunity to stack up her passive. And that's another part that makes her slightly weak, is she has to be able to stack her passive. If Lillia isn't really able to get to 5 stacks quickly, she's not able to play that sort of hit and run playstyle that you really want to do. So if you jump on her, that's part of the reason why it's so easy to kill her, because at low stacks, she just doesn't really have the ability to run away or to do anything about it. She just kind of dies. Talking on an ability by ability basis, her passive, mostly unnoticeable damage-wise. It's a little nice to have, like I said, for some target-agnostic damage, and it combos with her ultimate, which we'll get to here in a little bit. Talking about her Q, it's definitely a first max. I know I talked a little bit about like a maybe cheese W max because of how much damage a sweet spot W did, but you need your Q in order to stack up your passive quickly in order to have consistent damage in fights, especially skirmishes or ganks or even team fights. And W isn't really possible as a first max, except maybe outside of the jungle, but then you can't really stack your passive, so... And the damage on the W is nice, but because of the way Lillia's kit works, it's actually one of her riskiest abilities, because it's a very predictable dash. She has to get very close in order to actually damage you, and as I've kind of talked about already, Lillia is really, really squishy, so if she ever steps up too far, she just kind of dies, and that makes her W actually a risky ability to go for. Oftentimes, I've been sitting on W saying, well, I'd like to be able to, go for this extra damage here, but can I afford it? What cooldowns does the enemy champion have up? Because if I step too close, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to die instantly. So I have to be really careful when I go to use this. And the damage is relatively... it's not unbearable. I know I was talking a little bit about it in my preview saying, oh my god, the damage is so high, but as a second max, it's super bearable. It doesn't feel that bad, especially to get hit by a sweet spot. Obviously, it's still a bunch of damage, but it's not like face-melting amounts of damage, which is basically Lillia in general. Her E, Swirl Seed, is super fun. The long-range snipes are really nice, especially to set up a gank. If you can land a Swirl Seed from Fog of War, and then immediately follow that up with your ultimate to get the sleep in order to close the distance and actually get yourself in range for the play, there's a lot of really fun things you can do with that, or throwing it down a lane when an enemy doesn't expect it and hit them and maybe get a little bit of extra damage in there. It's kind of a nice ability. The fact that it's got a slow on it as well. I know it's not a super strong slow and the damage isn't super high, but a slow is a slow, and Lillia needs all of the defensive tools she can get to survive in fights. So that helps her kite just a little bit more effectively. Finally, Lilting Lullaby, which is her R, is a really fun utility tool. It doesn't feel like you're almost ever going to get the situation where you hit everybody on the enemy team with your passive and then you press R and you put every single one of them to sleep. Like, that's almost never, ever going to happen. Instead, it's a utility tool. You're going to hit 1 or 2 champions with it. You're going to put them to sleep in the middle of a team fight to buy your team an opportunity to finish off the rest of the enemy team members or to kill the now immobilized team members that you put to sleep. You're going to use it to give yourself time to escape, especially if you get caught in the jungle. In that regard, it's like Ivern's Daisy, where, okay, the Graves found Ivern in this jungle. He's going to press R and hope Daisy can body block or do enough damage or do enough disruption to Graves that he can run away. It's very similar to that, where you just kind of hit the enemy champion with the cube, press R, and hope you can run fast enough that by the time the Drowsy goes off, you can get to safety. And that's sort of the biggest thing to me, is the Drowsy takes so long to go through that it's really possible for you to just kind of die in the cast animation before you can really get this off. So it's definitely not a panic button that helps you get to safety in every situation. You have to be very cognizant and very aware of when and where you use this ability, especially because it has a longish cooldown, unless you take Ultimate Hunter. So it does feel like there's a bit of a disadvantage to using this ability. It's not just an instant win button. So I know a lot of people were concerned about Lilting Lullaby, obviously calling it Tilting Lullaby, but it's not so bad. I wouldn't be too worried about that ability. Now, general viability, Lillia is very weak in the early stages of the game in her jungle. She's not the strongest clear of all time, so especially against aggressive champions like Graves, Lee Sin, Kha'Zix even, I can see Lillia just kind of getting blown up and dying and having little impact on the game. And she definitely needs a front line to fight behind. She really wants a tank or somebody to kind of walk in and help her set up the play, because she has to have someone engaged in the fight at all time. Otherwise, it's too predictable. Her pattern of just kind of running back and forth and hitting you, and there's just not a lot you can really do with it. So it does hurt her ability to be played professionally, but she does do a very non-ignorable amount of damage, especially if she's landing sweet spot Qs. And like I said, in certain team compositions, she can be really hard to deal with just because of how mobile she is, especially if she stacks up her passive. That being said, Lillia is still really weak when she falls behind. She already doesn't have very much survivability, so if she's behind, she loses even more survivability to kind of help her stay around in fights. She just kind of blows up the second any damage gets thrown her way, and the damage she does doesn't end up being that high. So I do feel like Lillia has a few disadvantages in that regard, and so you really have to make sure as Lillia that you're getting ahead, that you're able to set up ganks, or that your team is doing well, because otherwise you're just not going to bring that much to the table, which is a little disappointing. But in that regard, she's no different from other skirmishers like Riven or Master Yi, where when they fall behind, they don't do much outside of damage, and their damage will still be non-ignorable, but they just become too squishy and they don't really have opportunities to thrive in fights. So in that regard, I don't think Lillia will see pro play unless, again, some crazy exploit comes out. I know me and a friend were talking about the possibility of tank Lillia being a thing, saying, well, she does % max HP damage. Can that be abused? Looking at the numbers right now, I don't really feel like tank Lillia could be a thing. It's just the scalings really aren't there. But there is a possibility if the pros find a way to abuse her, I could see her show up in pro play. But otherwise, I don't see what Lillia brings to the table that other champions don't do better, or what you really want out of a jungler. I don't really see Lillia bringing much else. But I do think she's a super fun champion to play, and if you've been looking to pick up a new jungler, or especially if you're looking for a skirmisher who's just going to do a bunch of damage and really carry a team through the middle of a team fight, I do think that Lillia is a fun pickup. Those are my thoughts on Lillia. Go ahead and let me know what you guys are thinking of her down in the comment section below, especially what you've been building on her, how you've been playing her. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.